One of the best things about gaming on a PC is being able to make your games look better than any console ever could, using the vast array of graphical settings and options that most modern games offer, and the results can be truly incredible. But what if your PC can't handle anything more than the lowest settings? Is it still worth picking up and playing the latest games? Hello everyone, my name's Nathan, and today we're looking at whether or not your graphics settings really make a difference by comparing what some of the most popular games right now look like at their ultra settings against what they look like at their lowest settings. So I wanted to start by looking at my personal go-to game for a good hour or so of fun, and that's Rainbow Six Siege. And while it's not the most beautiful game in the world, it still looks pretty damn good, and a lot of people will want to be playing this one on PC for that extra pixel perfect accuracy that a lot of players feel like they need in a competitive shooter. Playing as I usually do with the ultra settings is a joy, and everything just looks right somehow. Using an ash charge to blow up a wall or seeing the destruction that Fuse's gadget can cause to an entire room has a real impact at ultra settings, not to mention Sledge's hammer, which just feels great and looks fantastic. So turning down the settings to low, I was expecting to have a pretty bad time of it. I expected textures not to look right, destruction to lose its oomph, and even just a harder time spotting the enemy, given the difference that a single pixel can make in a game like this thanks to the one-shot headshot mechanic. But I'm happy to say that just wasn't the case. Sure, if you look for it, you can absolutely tell the difference, and if you put the footage of ultra and low side by side like I have here, it's obvious that one is better than the other. But in the heat of combat, when you're concentrating on taking down the enemy and getting to the objective, it feels just as good, and I actually had a few really good rounds playing on the low settings. So while I can't say for sure that there was absolutely no negative effect on my gameplay from downgrading to the low settings, it's certainly not something that I felt while I was playing. I'm obviously by no means a brilliant player, but I didn't feel any better or worse from playing on ultra to low. The setting that affects the graphics the most, in my opinion, is the anti-aliasing in Siege. So if you're looking at this footage and thinking it actually does look significantly worse, one, I would disagree with you, but if you can turn on one level of AA, the game's going to start to look a lot better. But even if you can't do that, you can still have a true Siege experience using mouse and keyboard, even on the lowest settings. Moving on then from my go-to favourite shooter of the moment to the most popular game in the world right now, in the form of Fortnite. And I'll warn you right now before you start really watching this footage that I am complete and utter crap at this game. Basically, if I don't catch someone completely unawares, there's no way I'm winning the shootout. And if they start building cover the second I shoot at them, I know they're better than me and I'm going to lose. All that being said though, I do enjoy Fortnite, and the graphical style that Epic Games went with for this one certainly adds something to the experience. The cartoony nature of the graphics means that you can easily pick out an enemy player from the background, and if you stop and look around while playing Fortnite, you'll notice some really nice effects. From the water to the lighting and shadows, this game really looks good. Changing down to the low settings though is a different story. Holy crap, the difference between the ultra, or in this case epic settings, and the low settings are night and day. You go from this crisp looking world to a jaggedy, blurry mess, and not only do things look worse, but I felt as though my gameplay was affected. I feel like Epic Games have made the settings for low so low that Fortnite can run on a potato. And I suppose that's a good thing for getting players involved in the game, but if you really want to play Fortnite, and if you can, I would absolutely recommend bumping up the settings. The biggest problem I think is that when you select the low settings, the render resolution lowers to 853 by 480, and on a 1080p monitor, that looks pretty awful. Now, there is another alternative for playing Fortnite, and just for fun, I thought I'd test this one a bit more using Fortnite Mobile. And in order to do that, I've got my trusty old iPhone 6s Plus, which is actually the minimum specs that this game will even run on. And given that fact, I was actually pleasantly surprised. Now the footage here is a little choppy, so I apologise for that, but that's a problem with the video and didn't actually happen while I was playing the game, and in my opinion this looks better than the low settings on PC. It was relatively easy to pick out enemies at a distance, and while it's not a patch on Ultra PC settings, of course it's not, the game looks pretty decent when played on the small screen of a phone. The only real problem here for me was the touch controls, but graphically speaking, No problems whatsoever. And I think it really is the small screen that makes all the difference here, because when we blow this footage up and I'm watching it back now on a 1080p monitor, it does look worse than the low settings video, and if I shrink the low settings video down to the size of a phone screen, it looks quite nice. So bear that in mind when comparing the two. But even with that said, I'm still really impressed that a game like Fortnite can run on a mobile device. Just a few years ago, that wouldn't have even been thinkable, and I actually had a really good time playing Fortnite on my phone. Now for Fortnite, this is a bit of a weird one, because I can't say don't buy it if you can only manage low settings, since it's free, so you might as well download it and see what your computer can manage. But I will say right now that Fortnite was the game that I had the most trouble with when I dropped down to the low settings. But I would imagine that a lot of even low-end PCs will be able to manage a higher setting than this. So we've done two big multiplayer titles, so how about we try probably the most recent big single player game in Far Cry 5. Now I know we've already done a Ubisoft game, but this one is running on a different engine, in this case Dunia, where Siege runs on Anvil Next, and it's a very different sort of game with a much bigger scope that aims to actually immerse you into the world, so those graphics matter far more here than they would in Siege. And at ultra settings, this is a damn good looking game. It's not always brilliantly optimized, but Montana makes for a beautiful setting, and pair that with the massive explosions and chaos that the Far Cry series offers, and you have a graphical hit. Dropping the game down to low though doesn't actually hurt it too much. Sure, there are a few weird things that just look completely off, like the water in certain places. Oddly enough, it looks okay in some areas, but this big lake that I'm showing off now obviously just looks awful for some reason. And areas with dense foliage also suffer heavily, as a lot of it isn't even rendered. But on the whole, I could have fairly happily played through Far Cry 5 at low settings without too much of a problem. There would have always been a little voice in the back of my head saying, hey, this could look better, but I still would have enjoyed my time with it. Truth be told, I played Far Cry 5 for about 15 hours, had a great time, and then I totally lost interest. And I think that would have happened playing at low or ultra. It didn't really matter. The fact that the game looks great in this case is just a nice bonus, but the game still felt good with the settings turned down. Busting into an enemy outpost with a truck and setting your pet cougar free to terrorize the cult members is still brilliant if slightly stupid fun, even at the low settings, and unless you're actively stopping to look around to try to see the difference, you'll have just as much of a good time either way. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a lot of systems that struggle with this one in certain areas, as while it's not terribly optimized, it's far from perfect. Now, I just wanted to quickly touch on my all-time favourite game, which is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Still one of the best looking games available to this day, and at its release, a very challenging game for a lot of PCs to run. Now, I've decided to run around a bit in Tucson from the Blood and Wine DLC here, because it's one of the best looking areas of the game, and shows off perfectly the differences between Ultra and Low. At its best, this game is absolutely gorgeous, with amazing looking open areas, water, and a fantastic skybox, and it's one of the essential PC games in my opinion. Lowering the settings does take some of the gleam away in terms of the details. For example, comparing Geralt's face here, you can quite obviously see that Ultra is a lot nicer, with a lot more detail on things like his scars and wrinkles. That downgrade in detail though is definitely not the biggest issue. In my opinion, the biggest issue is the draw distance. In these fields of Tucson looking out at ultra settings, you'll see grass and plants all the way to the horizon. At low though, it just looks like someone spilled green paint on the floor. And it's even worse when you're riding around on your horse at high speed, with assets popping in all over the place. Here's the thing though, I'd still recommend playing this game even if you can only hit these low settings. I think what I've come to realise in the course of making this video is that graphics are just the cherry on top of the cake. Yeah, sure, it's a nice addition, but even when it's not there, you've still got a cake. And if you've ever seen me, you'll know that I like my cake. Graphics are a bonus, and you might notice them the first time you load up a game, but it's really the gameplay that keeps you coming back, and other factors like frame rate make far more of a difference. Now, I've tested this on a lot of different games that I won't go in depth with here. I will just show you the footage, but I don't want to talk about any more specifically. And while it's always nicer to have those fancy graphics, it doesn't change how good the game is. Witcher 3 at low is still The Witcher 3. Overwatch at low is still Overwatch. And COD World War II at low is still COD World War II, whether you like it or not. So while I won't be giving up my beefy PC anytime soon, and I'll be going straight back to my ultra settings, I fully believe that a good game should be experienced even if it's at low settings. So that's about it for today. I'd love to know what you guys think about this in the comments. Would you be prepared to play a new game at the lowest settings, or would you just skip it altogether? Personally, I'd have no problem lowering them, especially if it got me to a nice stable 60 FPS, but let me know what you think. I'm also considering doing more of these sort of videos as well, maybe looking at things like if it really matters whether you play at 720p or 1080p, or the difference between 1080 and 4K, so let me know if that's something you're interested in, or if you have any more suggestions. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, I'd be very appreciative if you'd click that like button down below, and subscribe for more like this if you haven't already. I've been Nathan, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.